Chapter 65. It will be remembered that the Abbé Busoni remained alone with Noirtier in Valentine's room, and that the old man and the priest were the sole guardians of the young girl's body. The priest's Christian exhortations, or perhaps his persuasive words, apparently restored Noirtier's courage, for he soon threw off the black despair that had taken possession of him. He gave every indication of a calm resignation, which was quite surprising to those who remembered his deep love for Valentine. Villefort had not seen Noirtier since the morning of Valentine's death. Locked in his study, he worked feverishly at preparing the case against the murderer of Caderousse. The affair, like everything in which the Count of Monte Cristo was involved, had made a great stir among the people of Paris. The evidence was not too convincing, for it consisted primarily of a few lines written by a dying criminal who had escaped from prison with the man he accused, and who might have accused him through hatred or a desire for vengeance. Villefort alone had convinced himself that Benedetto was guilty. The trial was to begin in 3 days, thanks to Villefort's incessant work in preparing the case. His daughter, Valentine, had been laid to rest so recently that no one was surprised to see him so completely absorbed in his work, which was the only thing he could find to distract himself from his grief. Overwhelmed with fatigue and bowed beneath the weight of a single implacable thought, Villefort went out to take a walk in the garden. Looking toward the house, he noticed that one of Noirtier's windows was open. The old man had had his chair pushed up to that window so that he could enjoy the last rays of the late summer sun. Noirtier's eyes were fixed on something with such an expression of savage hatred and burning impatience that Villefort followed his line of vision to discover the person to whom this dark look was directed. Beneath a clump of linden trees, whose boughs were almost bare, he saw his wife sitting with a book in her hand. From time to time she interrupted her reading to smile at her son Edward, or to toss the ball back, which he obstinately persisted in throwing out into the garden from the salon. Villefort paled, for he understood Noirtier's thoughts. Suddenly, Noirtier turned his gaze from the wife to the husband, and it was Villefort himself who had to undergo the attack of those fiery eyes. He began to walk slowly toward the house, but the eyes followed him as he went, filled with withering reproach and terrible menace. Then Noirtier looked up at the sky, as though reminding his son of a forgotten oath. "Be patient," said Villefort, who was now standing beneath Noirtier's window. "Be patient for only 1 more day. I'll keep my promise." Noirtier appeared to be calmed by these words. He indifferently looked away in another direction as Villefort violently unbuttoned his collar as though he were choking, passed his hand over his forehead, and went back into his study. That night, as was his custom, Villefort did not go to bed at the same time as the other members of his household. He stayed up till 5 o'clock in the morning, reviewing the reports of the examining magistrates in the Benedetto case, carefully going through the declarations of the witnesses and putting the finishing touches on his indictment, which was one of the most energetic and skillfully conceived speeches he had ever written. He dozed off for an instant as his lamp was giving forth its last gleams. Its flickering woke him up. He went over to the window and opened it. There was a streak of reddish light across the horizon. The moist air of dawn flooded into him and revived his memory. "Today," he said with an effort, "the man who holds the sword of justice must strike wherever there is guilt." Involuntarily his eyes sought the window in which he had seen Noirtier's face the day before. The curtains were drawn, but his father's image was so vivid in his mind that he addressed the closed window as though he could still see the old man's threatening eyes there. "Do not worry," he murmured. He walked around his study several times and finally stretched out on the sofa, fully dressed, less in order to sleep than to rest his limbs, stiffened with the fatigue of his long night of work. Gradually the house began to awaken. From his study Villefort could hear the opening and closing of doors, the tinkle of his wife's bell as she summoned her maid, and the first shouts of his son Edward, who awakened joyfully, as one usually does at that age. Villefort rang. His new valet entered, bringing him the morning papers and a cup of hot chocolate. "What's that?" asked Villefort. "A cup of hot chocolate," replied the valet. "I didn't ask for it. Who is being so thoughtful of me?" "Madame de Villefort, sir. She said the murder trial would probably be a great strain on you today, and that you needed strength." The valet set down the cup and left the room. Villefort looked at it for a moment with a somber air, then suddenly picked it up with a nervous movement and drank down its contents in one draught. It was as though he hoped the chocolate were poisoned, as though he were calling on death to deliver him from a duty which commanded him to do something much more difficult than dying. Then he stood up and walked around his study with a sort of smile that would have been horrible to see if anyone had been watching him. The chocolate was harmless, and Villefort felt nothing. Lunchtime arrived, and he did not appear at table. His valet entered and said, "Madame wishes to inform you, sir, that it is now 11 o'clock, and the court opens at noon." "Well?" "Madame is ready to leave, and asks if she may go with you, sir." "Where?" "To the Palace of Justice." "Why?" "Madame says she wishes very much to be present at this trial." "Ah," said Villefort, in a tone that was almost frightening. "She wishes that, does she?" The valet stepped back and said, "If you wish to go alone, sir, I'll tell Madame so." Villefort remained silent for a time, scratching his pale cheek with his fingernails. "Tell Madame," he replied finally, "that I wish to speak to her, and that I ask her to wait for me in her room." "Yes, sir." "Then come back to shave me and dress me." "Right away, sir." The valet left, returned soon afterward, shaved Villefort, and dressed him solemnly in black. When he had finished, he said, "Madame says she'll expect you as soon as you've finished dressing, sir." "I'll go there now." Villefort stopped before his wife's door for an instant and wiped away the sweat that was streaming down his forehead. Then he opened the door. Madame de Villefort was sitting on an ottoman, impatiently looking through some newspapers and pamphlets which young Edward, to amuse himself, was cutting to pieces before his mother had time to read them. She was completely dressed and ready to go out. Her hat was laid out on an armchair, and she had already put on her gloves. "Ah, there you are," she said, her voice natural and calm. "But you're so pale. You must have worked all night again. Well, are you going to take me with you, or shall I go with Edward?" "Edward," said Villefort, looking at the child imperiously, "go play in the salon. I want to talk to your mother." Edward raised his head and looked at his mother. Then, seeing that she did not confirm Villefort's order, he went back to cutting off the heads of his lead soldiers. "Edward!" shouted Villefort so harshly that the child jumped. "Did you hear what I said? Get out!" The boy, who was not accustomed to such treatment, stood up and turned pale. It would have been difficult to say whether it was from anger or from fear. His father walked over to him, took him by the arm and kissed him on the forehead, and said, "Go, my son." Edouard left the room. Villefort bolted the door behind him. "What's the matter?" asked the young woman, looking searchingly at her husband and attempting to smile in the face of his icy impassivity. "Where do you keep the poison you use?" asked Villefort bluntly, standing between his wife and the door. Madame de Villefort felt the sensation which a lark must feel as it watches the hawk narrowing its deadly circles above its head. A hoarse, choked sound that was neither a cry nor a sigh escaped from her bosom. I don't understand," she said. "I asked you," said Villefort in a perfectly calm voice, "where you hid the poison with which you killed my father-in-law, Monsieur de Saint-Méran, my mother-in-law, Barrois, and my daughter Valentine." "Oh, what are you saying?" cried Madame de Villefort, clasping her hands. "It's not for you to question, but to answer." "Am I speaking to my husband or to a judge?" stammered Madame de Villefort. "To a judge, madame, to a judge." "Oh, oh," murmured Madame de Villefort. She said nothing more. "You're not answering, madame," cried the terrible interrogator. Then he added with a smile that was still more frightening than his anger, "Of course, you're not denying anything either." She made a movement. "And you can't deny it," continued Villefort, putting out his hand toward her as though to seize her in the name of justice. "You carried out your crimes with a certain shameless skill, yet only those whose affection made them willing to blind themselves with regard to you could have been deceived. Ever since the death of Madame de Saint-Méran, I've known there was a murderer in my house. Dr. d'Avrigny warned me. After the death of Barrois, my suspicions, may God forgive me, fell on an angel. But after Valentine died, I no longer had any doubt, and certain other persons were equally sure. It's time for your crimes to be made public now, and as I've already told you, I'm not speaking to you as your husband, but as a judge." The young woman hid her face in her hands. "Oh, I beg you," she stammered, "don't believe in appearances." "Are you so cowardly?" exclaimed Villefort contemptuously. "As a matter of fact, I've always noticed that poisoners are cowards. And yet you had the hideous courage to kill 3 people and watch them die before your eyes. Please, please. You counted the minutes of 4 death agonies," continued Villefort with growing emotion. "You devised your devilish plans and prepared your infamous poison with wonderful skill and precision. But I wonder if you neglected to consider one thing, the consequences that your crimes might have. But that's impossible. You must have at least have kept another poison, gentler yet deadlier than the other, to enable you to escape the punishment that was your due. I hope you did that. Did you?" Madame de Villefort wrung her hands and fell to her knees. I know, went on Villefort, "you confess, but a confession made to a judge at the last moment, when it's no longer possible to deny the crime, in no way diminishes the punishment inflicted on the criminal." "Punishment?" cried Madame de Villefort. "That's the 2nd time you've said it." "Do you think you'll escape punishment because you're the wife of a woman who will demand it in the name of the law? No. The scaffold awaits the poisoner, whoever he may be." Madame de Villefort uttered a wild shriek, and a look of hideous, irresistible terror came over her face. "Oh, don't be so afraid of the scaffold," said the magistrate. "I don't want to dishonor you, for I'd be dishonoring myself also. No, if you've listened carefully to what I've said, You must realize that you can't die on the scaffold." "I don't know what you mean," murmured the wretched woman, completely discomposed. "I mean that the wife of the most outstanding magistrate of Paris will not taint him with her infamy. She will not dishonor both her husband and her son at the same time." "No, oh no." "Well then, that will be a good deed on your part, and I thank you for it." "You thank me? For what?" "For what you just said." "What did I say? My head's in a whirl. I don't understand anything. Oh, my God, my God." "You have not answered the question I asked you when I came in. Where is the poison you use?" Madame de Villefort raised her arms and convulsively wrung her hands. "No, no," she cried vehemently. "You can't want me to do that." "What I don't want is for you to die on the scaffold. Do you understand me?" "Have mercy on me." "What I want is that justice be done," said Villefort. "I was placed on this earth to punish the guilty," he added with a fiery look. "I would send any other woman, even a queen, straight to the executioner. But to you I will be merciful. To you I say, you've kept some of your deadliest poison, haven't you?" "Oh, forgive me. Let me live." "You're a coward." "Remember that I'm your wife." "You're a murderer." "In the name of God." "No." "In the name of the love you once had for me." "No, no." "In the name of our child. Oh, let me live for the sake of our child." "No. And if I let you live, you might kill him some day as you killed the others." "I kill my son?" cried the savage mother, throwing herself at Villefort. "Kill my Edouard?" And a hideous laugh, the laugh of a demon or a madman, finished her sentence and trailed off into a groan. She fell at her husband's feet. "Remember," he said, "that if justice had not been done when I return, I will denounce you with my own lips and arrest you with my own hands." She listened to him, panting, overwhelmed, crushed. Her eyes were the only thing alive in her, and they glowed with terrible fire. "You understand me," said Villefort. "I'm going to the Palace of Justice now to demand the death penalty for a murderer. If I find you alive when I return, you will be in prison by nightfall." Madame de Villefort heaved a sigh. Her strength failed her, and she sank to the floor. Villefort seemed to feel a surge of pity. He looked at her less severely, leaned slightly forward, and said slowly, "Goodbye, madame. Goodbye." The words cut into her like a knife. She fainted. The public prosecutor walked out, locking the door behind him.